Welcome to Pioneer Mindset, a place where we challenge our mindset and address the discomfort in both business and life by finding clarity resulting in bold conviction. I'm your host, Garrett Ruskamp, fifth generation farmer, husband, and father from rural Nebraska. Whether you're navigating frustration from past decisions or worry about the uncertainty you face today in your business, we're going to learn from our struggles and take on new challenges with a resilient mindset. Join me as I share my journey of struggles I faced in agriculture as a farmer and family man. I'm ready to dive into honest conversations to tackle the mindsets surrounding key issues that rural ag business owners face that will ultimately help you gain control, leading to a profitable and sustainable business. Let's adapt to Pioneer Mindset and get to it. All right, welcome back everyone to this week's episode of Pioneer Mindset. I'm really excited to have a guest with me on this week's episode. I'm going to be talking to John Sachse, and really excited to dive into this week's episode. And we got connected like anybody these days, right, over social media and whatnot. I'd actually listened to a podcast that he was on last fall. I can recall it perfectly because I was listening to it during harvest. And so I just remember exactly where I was at, loading trucks into the bin. And he was on a podcast called The Farm Marketer, or I guess it was the Impact Farming Show, and with Tracy there. And so it was a really good episode. We kind of reconnected on Instagram and been talking back and forth with him quite a bit. And so excited to have him on today. Going to be talking about a lot of different things, but I'll let him introduce himself and we'll get started.
Yeah, well, Garrett, I'm really excited to connect with you and visit with you here for a little bit. I want to first applaud you for the Pioneer Mindset podcast. The field is, I think, oftentimes sometimes crowded in the podcast arena, but you found a niche here in agriculture. You talk about mindset, you talk about finances, and I know you've been at this for a year and a half, I think. Was doing some digging on when you got started, and you've kind of gotten over that early hump and kind of through some challenges and stuff at the podcast. And so I want to commend you and applaud you for continuing this, because this is for sure absolutely needed for those of us in agriculture, whether you farm or ranch. So looking forward to this conversation and want to congratulate you on the podcast.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I really do. But yeah, this is a guest episode. Let's kick it off. Tell me a little bit about you, where you're at, where you're from, and what you do, and we'll kind of go from there.
Yeah. So I'm a man that has a lot of irons on my fire. I'm first and foremost a Christian husband to my wife, Kinsley. I've been married almost 10 years. We've got two little boys who are 7 and 4. I'm a fourth generation Kansas rancher here, not too far from Kansas City. I have the opportunity to serve in the Army National Guard as an officer. Just took company command not too far from where I live. So really excited about that opportunity to serve and lead in that capacity. Own my own mindset coaching business called RanchFIT, an endurance athlete. And I don't, Garrett, tell you all of those things to impress your audience of, hey, look at all these things that John has going for him. But I share that because first and foremost, I'm a Christian and a follower of Christ. And so basically every day I wake up with a posture and a service towards serving and adding value to those around me. And none of those things that I listed to you, the job titles, whatever they are, none of those things define me. Those are just the tools and the levers in which I pull that I can serve and add value to those around me. So one day I might be serving others by selling and marketing our Bull's private treaty to somebody, or I might have guard drill for the next 2 days after that. But those are just the tools and levers in which I serve those around me. And I share that with when I do public speaking or coaching clients. I love sharing that because oftentimes our days get so cluttered with X, Y, and Z. And as ranchers, we have so many irons in our fire. But if we know kind of our purpose, our higher calling, our why, essentially, Simon Sinek talked a lot about starting with why. I'm very clear on my why, and that's serving and adding value to others. And so everything just kind of funnels under that each and every day.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really do appreciate that background. And because I think everything you talked about makes you going to be very relatable, because you talked about having a lot of irons in the fire. Well, probably people listening to this are probably having a lot of irons in the fire, right? We got lots of different things going on. And so it can be a challenge to manage all that, but kind of bringing it back to knowing your why, I think that's great that you know that. There's not always a lot of people that do actually have their why firmly written down or firmly established, right? And so I think there's a lot of different areas that we could dive into. And I guess as you just mentioned, you sell bulls and whatnot. And so it made me think of this ahead of time. I was thinking about this before is with this podcast episode, with everything you're talking about, with mindset, with all the different irons you have in the fire, it makes me think that this is going to be just a really good podcast episode. So it reminds me of, back when we were buying bulls or maybe buying show calves when I showed in high school and whatnot. And every time they've got a set of calves for sale, it's always the best calves that they've ever raised, right? This is the best set that they've ever had, right? And so that's why I'm always like, whenever time I record a podcast, especially when I bring a guest on, I'm like, this is going to be the best one, and I do think having John on here today is going to be really good. And especially not that timing is everything, but I think especially in agriculture right now, especially in the row crop side of things, as we get into these conversations, talking about resilience, talking about some other different things that you're going to mention, I think it's a really good time to really bring this up, especially in the mindset, because there's going to be some hard times here in agriculture. And even if there isn't row crop, even if you're going through good times right now, there's always going to be something that we're having to face and having to work through. And I also appreciate you bringing up the fact that foremost that we're here to serve, right? We're here to serve, as Christians and as sons here, right? And so thank you for sharing all of that. I guess let's just kind of dive into this. I was thinking about covering the resilient side of things first. If there's anything else that you want to cover, let's just kind of dive into this.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Garrett, I find this so often, and not just in agriculture, but especially agriculture, and maybe a little bit in the military as well with my background in the Guard. But most people consider, there's kind of a negative connotation with mental health. And mental health to me isn't anything that's necessarily wrong with any of us. So I kind of reframe the mental health terminology as just brain health. And when you view it from that perspective, brain health is just as much, or our brain rather, is just as much of a muscle as our biceps, our quads, our legs, whatever it is. It's just as much of a muscle as anything else. So if you're an athlete and you want to be a better runner at the 1 mile, the 100 meter, or an endurance athlete, you're going to practice and continually build and break down that muscle and just keep building it back up stronger. And that's all our brain health is. And so when I hear mental health, I kind of reframe it in the lens of brain health, and that it's just a muscle that we need to work. And so when I think about brain health, I really, there's some key kind of components and tools, if you will. I'll share just kind of there's, Garrett, probably hundreds of resiliency tools that you can add to your life to make you just a little bit more resilient. But there's 3 that kind of easily always come to mind when I'm talking to somebody. And it's 3 that I practice on a daily basis. And so we'll talk about them. So the first is facing our fears. I think when you face your fears, oftentimes fears are just the constructs that we've kind of made up in our mind. Oftentimes we make X, Y, and Z out to be so much worse than it ever will even come to fruition. And so when we can face our fears and overcome those things, we add a ton of confidence, and confidence in turn will build resiliency into our mindset. When I look back at some of the things I've been fearful of, Garrett, and my mind goes back in officer candidate school in the Guard. We had this day of basically when we were doing an obstacle course, and I am not a fan of heights. I don't know about you, but I can't stand them. I can get up on a ladder and put Christmas lights on just fine, but anything above that, I'm a no-go. So we had this obstacle course. I love obstacle courses, and I'm physically active, so I wasn't having any problem with the course up until we got to this 20, 30 foot tall telephone pole. And there was these metal rungs that were nailed into it, spaced out pretty far. And the obstacle, or what you were supposed to do, is climb all the way up to the top. And then at the top, there was this probably 1 foot by 1 foot wooden platform nailed at the top. And you're supposed to climb to the top, somehow stand up. And I remember it being kind of an abnormally windy day too, which didn't help this. And then you were supposed to jump up and out to this metal bar that hung on a nearby tree. And nobody, I was probably halfway through the line of 20 or 30 of us. And some people were getting to the top, but those who got to the top, nobody was getting the metal bar. And I just kind of had this negative spiral going on in my head. And I thought, why am I even here? Why did I even join the Guard? This was nothing that I even needed to do. I kind of had all these worst case scenarios with this negative thought loop. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to go after this. Part of it was that we had to. We were going to get yelled at if we didn't, being an officer candidate school. But I decided to just take a deep breath and take one step at a time. So I took one step on the first rung, then the second rung, just took it slow, methodical, and I eventually got to the top and I lifted myself up. I felt like the top was just swaying all over the place. I don't know how it looked from the ground, but I was moving all over the place. And I remember just closing my eyes and just taking a deep breath in that moment. And I opened my eyes and thought, I'm just going to go for it. And I ended up jumping up and out, and I was one of the few people that got the metal bar. And I share that story not to say, hey, I was one of the few to get it, but that was me just doing that thing that I hated and was fearful of. I gained so much confidence in that moment, in that experience, that it flooded into all other areas of my life. It gave me confidence for the rest of that day, for the rest of officer candidate school, for things that I, still face to this day. And that was 4 or 5 years ago. And it's just another piece of confidence that I can add to my belt, so to say, of confidence, another kind of loop, if you will, on my belt. And so I think building confidence is so key to resiliency. The second piece is serving and adding value to others. We talked about that at the beginning, but when you can, I don't know anybody, Garrett, who is stressed, worried, or anxious, but who goes and serves and puts somebody else first, whether it's at a soup kitchen or on a mission trip. And when you leave that experience, you're still stressed or worried or anxious. It just, your mind can't handle being stressed or worried and being thankful and grateful all at the same time. So I encourage people, and I encourage myself, I push myself on a daily basis to do something to at least serve one person every day. And again, it can be going to a soup kitchen. You don't have to be in the Guard or the military or a firefighter. It can be something as little as holding the door open for somebody at the grocery store. Oftentimes, and my wife doesn't let me go to the grocery store very often to get our groceries, but the few times that she does, I often think, man, this person at the cash register probably gets the most basic conversations, nothing in depth, just the most, like, some people don't even say hi to them. They're just kind of there going through the motions. And I make it a point to slow down and acknowledge them. And I think sometimes even just acknowledging somebody, smiling at somebody when you pass, that's an act of service. And so serving and putting somebody else before yourself, hands down, adds resiliency to your life. And then lastly, I think the third thing, and again, there's hundreds of things, Garrett, but I think just being grateful for the things around us. Every single day I wake up and I think of at least 3 to 5 things that I'm thankful or grateful for, because our mind can't comprehend, again, back to the serving thing, it can't be focused on being grateful and thankful for something and also being stressed or worried at the same time. We just don't have the kind of the bandwidth, if you will, to handle both of those things. And so when you can be grateful for both the small, and large things in your life, it adds a ton of resiliency to your mindset. And some of the best moments I've had are the times when I can look back and reflect on the things that I'm grateful for. For instance, going through basic training in the military, you're stripped of everything that we have here on the civilian side. No coffee, no cell phone, no connection to the outside world. And so when I got back on the plane to come back home from basic training, I remember just being at the airport and having airport coffee, which I hadn't had coffee for months. It was probably terrible coffee, Garrett, now that I look back, but that was the best coffee I've ever had. And oftentimes I still to this day, I went to basic training, I think 7 years ago, and I still remember sitting on the airplane drinking airport coffee, and that being one of the best coffee. And like, nobody else was on the plane. I was the first one on. Little things like that I am still grateful for. So practicing gratitude is so key, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And man, you gave me a lot there to really unpack. And I want to go back to the beginning as far as calling it brain health. I think sometimes just rephrasing that, because there's a pretty negative connotation around mental health, to be honest. I think we kind of say, well, I don't have to worry about mental health because I'm not mentally handicapped, so to speak. You know what I mean? Or like just like that weakness behind that phrase with mental health. I feel like we just associate that as a weakness. And so, but you're absolutely right, because if we rephrase that to brain health, we know that physical health is good, but we don't put a lot of weight on the mental health side of things, or once again, the brain health, right? And so I really like the fact that you rephrased that and able to kind of take away some of that negative connotation. I think that's very helpful. And then there too, talking about those three simple things. I'm not saying that they're always the easiest, I'm sure, but I think everything, when it comes to the answers with all of the questions that we face, generally they're pretty simple, right? And they're pretty straightforward. And if we can keep them simple, they're a lot easier to remember and they're a lot easier to at least attempt to accomplish. And so I think there's a lot of good value there as well. You talk about facing fears, and I don't know if that's number one for a reason for you, but I think there's a lot of weight and put that in number one, because I feel like once we face our fears and we take action, you mentioned the negative thought loop. That is a very serious thing if you get on the wrong side of things. And if you listen to that too much and you don't take the action, you don't face your fears, right? And you talk about the not liking heights. I'm in the same boat for you. Once again, I could put up Christmas lights. I can do the things that are close to the ground. I can jump in the loader bucket. I can be, 5-10 feet in the air. I'll be fine. But we actually, about a couple weeks ago, we went on vacation and we were at Mahoney State Park, which is just outside of Omaha, Nebraska. And they've got a lookout tower there. And so you climb the lookout tower. I don't even know how high it is, but it's pretty high. And you kind of look over the river there, the Missouri River or the Elkhorn River. Anyways, that lookout tower for me, once you get up there, it's like shaking a little bit. And I'm like, I literally told myself, I'm doing this to face a fear, just to do it and to take action. Once you get up there, obviously you see the views and it's awesome and you've accomplished something. You get back down, you said, I did it. I took action. And so I think those things are awesome that you talked about there.
And Garrett, yeah, I love that you did that, because now, whether it's with my story or your story, going and doing those things, once you have done it, then your mind is like, man, what else can I do? It kind of goes to the next level. What else can I do? It's kind of like one more rung up. And these are all, some days, maybe they're easier than others to do those three things, but oftentimes I don't want to do any of those three things on, any of my days, but they're just the foundational pieces. And just think of whether you play sports or, something like that, whether you're a pro athlete or playing high school or college or anything in between. Oftentimes when you're kind of off in certain areas, it's because you got away from the foundation and the fundamentals, and those simple things, facing your fears, serving others and being grateful. Those are just the foundation pieces and kind of the fundamentals that we need to just keep coming back to.
Yeah, I agree. And then the fact that they are the foundation, and like you said, those are three simple things and that fit for you. And it might not be for somebody else, but I think in this world, there's so much information overload with all the different things you can do. You can jump off this podcast and go listen to 5 more that are going to give you 10 other things to do, right? I think the big thing is coming back to keeping things simple. And so I wanted to ask you, with those 3 things, how did you come up with those? How are those that kind of fit you? How did you ultimately come up with those 3 things?
That's a great question, Garrett. And I don't know if I've ever really thought of that, but I think I've always been big into personal development, especially going through high school and then college, and was fortunate enough to work for a U.S. senator as soon as I graduated from college. And he was huge on personal development and kind of making us better individuals. Obviously, that in turn, made his staff stronger and helped him in turn, but he pushed personal development a lot. And so I kind of grew up with personal development. But I think as I started to get into the mentorship and some coaching stuff through the Guard, I have the opportunity to mentor a lot of younger soldiers just as my role as an officer in the Guard. And I think just as I've gotten into coaching the last couple of years, I think as I've been reflective looking back, I think to be a good coach and just a leader, you have to be very reflective. And so as I look back, I've kind of acknowledged, hey, these are the things that have made me relatively successful in certain areas. And I could just kind of keyed in on those things and then just wanted to keep replicating those things. So it's not anything necessarily that I started to like put together as like oh yeah, okay, today I'm facing my fears and I'm serving somebody. I think I've just realized over time, those were a couple of the things that have made me successful. And once I acknowledged that and realized that, I just compounding, I just continue to do them over and over to kind of keep that ball rolling.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot of power, and we don't acknowledge this enough, but literally just acknowledging the things that worked or the things that could be a start of a foundation. And then even, I guess I wanted to make the comment back to the facing the fears. And one thing that, as you do face your fears, we think that we can do more things, which leads us to take more action. But at the end of the day, we also got to remember we've all been there to where we've done that. And then we face something else that's bigger, right? And something else that we need to accomplish. So usually there's always going to be a new level and something else to accomplish. It's going to take a little bit more courage to get past that fear, right? So it's kind of as we just get ourselves just get a little bit better, a little bit stronger, a little more courage, a little braver to face these fears. The fears are going to probably get a little bit bigger, right? It's not just always going to be easy things like taking a few steps, right? I guess that's where I'm trying to go with this is that we're going to find ourselves accomplishing more than what we probably ever thought we could. But as we do that, there's always going to be bigger new fears to accomplish. I'm trying to bring this around to like the arrival syndrome, to where we finally think that we could just accomplish anything. There's just always going to be something there, and that's okay. I'm just trying to make sure that we know that that's okay, that there's always going to be something else to accomplish. And, it's going to take another level of ourselves to get to that point.
Yeah, and I like that a lot, Garrett. And I think whether it's facing your fears or whether we're talking about goal setting with myself or with others, I think starting small, you can't go like, say and this is another fear that I hate deep water. So me swimming in the ocean is likely never going to happen, but maybe I should face my fears, Garrett. But I think taking smaller fears that maybe are within, I don't know if I wouldn't say within reason, but it's hard to go from where we are, point A, and maybe we're fearful of 5 different things. And then to go up here, that's hard, but just take some small incremental steps towards fear. So I'm afraid of heights. I wasn't going to jump out of an airplane, but me climbing up that pole, that was a relatively small kind of increase, obstacle that I could tackle on that fear ladder, if you will. So yeah, I think, facing your fears or whether you're talking about goals, don't try to eat it all at once. Just small, bite-sized, consistent and improvement, kind of the 1%, if you will. 1% incremental increases take you really far.
Right. Absolutely. And I think that's a perfect segue into talking about goals next. There's a lot of people that talk about goals, and I think there's a lot of merit to talking about goals, right? Let's maybe focus on that a little bit. What's your kind of approach to goal setting? What's some different things that you talk about? How do I set goals? How do I find if they're worth setting? How do I find if it's actually a goal that's important to us? Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. Well, such an important topic, and I don't think a majority of the population probably focuses on actually putting the right steps in place to accomplish goals, or even has the framework to do it. But I think first and foremost, going back to Simon Sinek, when you can start with your why or the end goal in mind, that is absolutely key. Because if you don't know what your point B is, you might know where you're starting at, your point A, but if you don't have point B identified, you're just going to be aimlessly wandering around. And so starting with the end goal in mind, kind of the end state is key. And that helps with your motivation and determination when things get hard, when you're trying to chase down your goals. If you can tie it back to your why, it keeps you going on the days that you don't want to continue. So I think oftentimes people, when they do set goals, it's not attached to anything bigger than that goal, and they just kind of lose steam. I'm a huge follower of Ed Milet in the personal development space, and he was told a couple of years ago he had some health issues, and he was told by his doctor when he was getting some lab results back, the doctor asked him, do you want to be there when your daughter gets married someday? And at this point, I think his daughter was like 10 or something like that. She, pretty young, well under marriage age. And he said, well, yeah, I definitely want to be there. Why do you ask me that? And he said, if you don't change things that you're doing now, you are another man is going to be walking your daughter down the aisle on her wedding day. And so him getting back into physical fitness, he played college baseball, but had kind of gotten out of fitness, and that brought him back. So at a deep level, his why and the goals that he set around fitness were paired to, hey, nobody's going to be walking my daughter down the aisle except for me on her wedding day. So at a deep level, his core values, his core beliefs, it was attached to his why, all of his fitness goals. And so I think first and foremost, starting with your why is key. I like to set, this is talked about a lot, but it's certainly very applicable, but SMART goals, making your goals very specific, making them very measurable, actionable, realistic, and time bound. You have to be able to sit there and visualize and actually see your goals. So a goal of mine is to run in the Boston Marathon someday. It's very, and I wanted to run it in 2026. I've had some injury and stuff that's going to prevent that from happening, but I had a date attached to it. So it was very specific. It was time bound. It was actionable. I needed the date, place, location, the event. So we have to be very specific with our goals. And then kind of the other framework that I utilize in my personal life is basically a 3-step goal setting process. And I didn't create this. It's from John Acuff in his book, All It Takes Is a Goal. Really great read. I'd encourage your listeners to quick, easy read. But he defines there being 3 different types of goals. So the first is small goals, then middle length goals, and then the last one is not longer term goals, but he calls guaranteed goals. And so, and I'll explain that here, what that means. So the small goals are things that just kind of get the ball rolling. So you can kind of think of this as maybe like a snowball effect. You've got some goals up on the top of a hill, and you just want to get the snowball effect, some confidence rolling downhill in the right direction. So you establish some small, easy goals. Maybe it's 24 hours that you could do in a day. Maybe they're week-long goals. But the idea is to start knocking out these easy goals, these easy wins, and stacking them upon themselves. And then those goals then feed into your middle length goals. And those are a little bit longer, a few weeks to a couple months, maybe 6 months time period of a goal. And then those eventually feed into your longer term goals. And the longer term goals he calls guaranteed goals, because it's not necessarily guaranteed that you're going to reach that longer term goal. But what is guaranteed is if you're doing the right small goals that feed into the right middle length goals that then feed into the longer term goals, what is guaranteed is that you're trending in the direction of your best version of yourself. And so, my longer term guaranteed goal is to run in the Boston Marathon. It's not guaranteed that I will ever even make it there, because there's a kind of a qualifying process and a lottery system. And it's pretty challenging even if you have the running time to get into the Boston. But I know if I am doing the right smaller goals and medium goals, I'm becoming a better version of myself. And that's trending me in the direction of me serving at my highest capacity. And so kind of utilizing the running example, my smaller goals are my weekly training plan. So if I'm training for a marathon, it's 16 to 18 weeks of a training plan. So my marathon, wherever it is, just say it's a marathon in Omaha, that might be the longer term goal. But then running a half marathon might be a middle goal that I have. It might be 3 months down the road. So something that you've got to put some planning into. And then my weekly training plan, or even my daily runs, those are my smaller goals. And you knock out your weeklies, and that feeds into your half marathon, and you run a couple half marathons, and that feeds into your running the Omaha Marathon. So I hope that makes sense. And it's just the point, Garrett, with all of that is that you can't just go run the Boston Marathon. You can't go climb Mount Everest. You can't go start your own business to do X, Y, and Z that makes $1 million a year. You have to have small goals that then feed into bigger goals that then feed in kind of the end goal in mind, if you will.
Right. No, I appreciate that long explanation. I think you also mentioned there's a lot of different resources out there that are helpful that we can definitely rely on to kind of provide us that framework there. But the one question I did want to ask you that kind of always comes up for me from time to time is, when is a goal actually worthwhile going after, if that makes sense? Or, we ask ourselves, I want to run in the Boston Marathon, or in your case, that's what you want to do. I mean, why is that a goal, in your opinion, that's attainable? Or in my case, if I want to accomplish X, Y, and Z on the farm or something like that, why is that a goal that's worth obtaining? How do you make sure that's kind of aligning with your values? Because I mean, we can set 100 goals out there, but at the end of the day, it's like, why is that one that's the one that we're going to go after? Or why is that one important to us? How do you kind of narrow that down a little bit, or to make sure that that's like kind of our true North Star, if that makes sense?
That's a great question, Garrett. I like that a lot. I think for me personally, and maybe you ask the next guest and they might have a different thought, but for me, I spent a lot of time just reflecting on where I've been in my past, where I'm currently at, and where I want to get to. And for me personally, and this is, because we're talking about physical fitness, I'll stay on that. Again, it could be related to your farming and ranching operation, but for me personally, the Boston Marathon, my goal is even almost beyond running the Boston. Like on paper, it's the Boston, but the feeling, the knowing that I just did something that probably not even 1% of the world population ever even attempts, let alone runs in it. I think just knowing that I pushed myself beyond what I physically thought was capable. I grew up sprinting. When I played baseball, I stole bases. And so I didn't have any reason to run over 400 meters in track, Garrett. But now that I don't play sports or baseball or anything like that, I've really kind of fallen in love with running and lifting as well, but especially running, because I get more, I'd say, mental gain, if you will, if that's a terminology, than physical gain. Just my mindset is so much sharper. I'm just more focused. I'm clear. I feel off when I don't work out. And actually, I'm kind of in a season of rehabbing an injury right now, and I'm getting over being sick. And so actually, I have, to be completely honest with you, I've been a little out of my training and my running, and I've been a little more maybe short and frustrated with my family and my work. When I work out and I prioritize fitness, I get more mental gains, and I can operate and I can serve at a higher level when I am doing those things. And so I guess for me, the Boston is on paper, yeah, that's the goal. But I think just knowing at a deeper level for me, the why behind it is that I will be serving at a capacity that I've never served at, because the mental gain that you get from working out is incredible. And just, again, the confidence is just one more rung. What else can I do? If I ran the Boston, what else can I do? It's kind of pushing the envelope. So again, on paper, it goes a little bit even beyond what's on paper. Running the Boston Marathon, well, I have a deeper kind of meaning and a why with it. In personal development, I've heard John Maxwell talk about this a lot, that oftentimes there's a lot of depression that comes with once you've reached your goal. I know Tom Brady winning, 7 Super Bowls or whatever the number is now. He had just kind of this decline after Super Bowls. And that's partially why he played so long, because he just had so much of his why and himself, like football just defined him, and there was nothing beyond that. And so for me, I want the Boston Marathon as something to chase after, but my why is even beyond that, and that's serving at an even higher level, if that makes sense.
It does. And I think that was great how you kind of brought that all back, because in my opinion, I feel like sometimes when we set goals, and this might just be me, but for probably the majority of the population out there, probably the majority of listeners, we might set this goal. Let's take this back to business. We might set this to where I want to farm 2,000 acres. We set this goal out there that we think is a goal. But at the end of the day, we ask ourselves, why is that a goal, or why is that important? And then we fixate on that. And then also we get to that and we're like, now what? Or you don't feel any different. You don't get to where like it's a satisfaction. You know what I mean? And so that's kind of where I was going behind that. And like, really for you, from the sounds of it, it's to serve and to push yourself to new things. It's not necessarily the thing that we picture or we set our mind on and we focus on so much. It's the greater meaning behind that. And I think that's what we tend to forget about, or we don't always think about when setting a lot of these goals.
Yeah, and there's even some research that suggests, from a scientific or from a cellular perspective, kind of internal amongst all of us, there is more dopamine release. So that's the kind of the feel good drug internally for us. There is more dopamine release in the pursuit of a goal on the climb than actually just as much or more on that pursuit than when you actually, reach the summit of whatever it is, whether you won the Super Bowl, whether you made $1 million in your business, ran the Boston, whatever the goal is, or climb Mount Everest. There is more dopamine release in the process than actually reaching the thing. Cause sometimes when you get to the reaching it, it's like, yeah, you mentioned, okay, now what? I was so wrapped up in that. I don't know what to do now kind of with myself. So that's something that I try to focus on is just the process is sometimes just as worth, if not more worthwhile than actually reaching the goal. And this is maybe counterintuitive to what we just talked about, Garrett, for the last 5-7 minutes. But I think sometimes it's not even about reaching the goal. Yeah, you've got to have something that you're chasing down, but I think it's even more about the pursuit and not even reaching the goal.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we always talk about that is it's the journey. It's not the destination, all that stuff. But at the end of the day, you got to have a reason why you're on that journey. You know what I mean? Like, and so I think that's where it kind of comes full circle. But at the end of the day, talking about goals and making sure that we have something to set our sights on. So that way we can, they always talk about shooting for the stars and hoping you land on the moon, right? So either way, you're further than where you are now. And I think we don't give ourselves enough credit for that. And we can get pretty wrapped up into trying to accomplish that goal. And even though we fall short, we feel like we didn't accomplish it, right? Even though we are further than what we had been. And so to bring this full circle, I think that's one thing I want to always realize is to make sure that once we're on that journey of accomplishing these goals, making sure that we do acknowledge and look back to see how far we've actually come. I don't think that's something that we do enough of. So good comment there. Since you had really led into it, it was a pretty good segue into the physical health side of things. I know that's a big one for you. I know I kind of talk about that a lot. You've got a lot of irons in the fire right now. You're training for doing the best that you can to at some point run in another big marathon. How do you focus on that when you've got everything with the guard, everything with the ranch, your business, your coaching business? How do you find the time to focus on the physical health side of things?
Yeah, well, this has been hard for me because I'm with certain aspects of my life. I am very rigid. My wife will be the first one to confirm that. But I grew up admiring my grandpa, who was in World War II, served during World War II in the Marines. And so he was an awesome grandpa, but with certain things is very rigid. And I admired that so much about him. And so some of that has rubbed off on me. But I'd say the first thing is you have to be adaptable and flexible because those of us in ag, every day is different. And you might have X, Y, and Z plan, but then it changes. Even preparing for this podcast, we talked about this before we hopped on the call, Garrett, but we're still trying to put up hay. And, I was committed to doing this podcast and I was trying to figure out, hey, we're getting this hay done today. There's rain coming. How do we navigate all that? And just being flexible with fitness, I think first and foremost is key. Yeah, to some degree, you have to have some rigidity to be consistent, but you've got to be flexible and just know, hey, there are certain seasons I maybe have to dial it back. Like, for instance, calving season, if we're out checking cattle at 2 or 3 in the morning, my likelihood of probably running that day are pretty small. And so, yeah, I can still make the plan to run that day, but maybe it's even just if I want to run 5 miles that day, maybe I only run 2 or 3. And so it's not scrapping the plan, but having, I think as I've matured in my fitness and then just how I coach and just live life, I think being flexible and adaptable with your plan is absolutely key. I mean, 5-10 years ago, I would have just chose to not even run or just like, oh, I've missed several days. Let me just scrap the entire plan. Garrett, as we're recording this right now, I was going really strong on running, and then I got a cold from my boys, and then had some work travel where I was speaking, and so I've gotten off of my running here about the last 10 days. And as I was reflecting for this call, I thought I need to just be flexible with this plan. I know there's things that come up, and you've just got to be flexible with things. So I hope that's helpful, kind of some first initial advice for those looking to add physical fitness while they're farming and ranching, to be flexible and just don't be as hard on yourself. You don't need to be. So add flexibility and adaptability.
Yeah, no, I can 100% agree there because it's pretty easy for us to get thrown off. It's pretty easy for us to want to do better and to strive to okay, I'm going to make the commitment to get into this, right? Or I'm going to run every day, or I'm going to work out every day. And then life happens. We miss a step here and there. And then we start telling ourselves, well, I missed those days. I don't need to do it today, or I can sleep in or whatever. And I know that's kind of happened for me. This last week, I had 2 really good days of running and I did really good. And then I can't remember what happened, but something threw me off for the rest of the week to where I didn't do as much, but I still made an effort. And then it is, it's Monday morning. Yesterday, I didn't do it. Sunday, to be honest, I was really tired from a late Saturday night and nothing happened yesterday. And so it would have been easier to start Monday off to where like, man, I'm so tired, I don't have to do it today. But I think having that flexibility is really key to making sure that at the end of the day, going back to the goals, that you're still moving and still getting something accomplished. So the last thing on that note that I wanted to ask, and you can add anything else there, but for those that don't really do much for their physical health, those that don't have the time or don't even take the time, it's really hard if you're not in this mindset to really try to pull people into that, if that makes sense. Because, we see the value in it. I know how much clarity I get when I'm out running. I know how much better I feel at the end of the day. But for those of you that maybe aren't in it, how do you convince people to start, or what do you say to those people, I guess?
Yeah, I think a couple things. Going back to, there's got to be a bigger reason behind it. So part of me why I'm also consistent or attempt to be consistent with flexibility, Garrett, with fitness is I'm still young, but I'm 34. I've got a son who's 7 and a son who's 4. And I can visualize in high school, I don't want to be the dad that's like, oh, I'm too tired, I'm too exhausted to go do anything with you or to go play catch. I want to be the dad who, my son came home from baseball. He wants extra practice for an hour and a half, and I'm going to go run with him. Whether I'm not doing the math in my head well, but I'd be probably in my early 50s or late 40s, wherever. I don't want to be the dad that sits there and says, no, son, I'm too tired. So I've kind of attached a deeper why where I don't want to be that dad. I want to be the dad that can still outrun his son when he's in high school and I'm in my 40s. That's another goal that I have. But I think whether maybe you're 60 right now, maybe kind of thinking outside the box with, hey, I want to be there for my grandkids. And I think attaching it to a deeper reason to just go run, yeah, that's hard. I don't always like to run, but you've got to attach it to something else. And so no matter what age you are, you can find something to attach physical fitness to at a deeper meaning. And I'd encourage people to think outside the box. Yeah, there might be some weeks, back-to-back weeks even, where you get up before 6 and you're working out at 6 for 30 minutes or for an hour, whatever it is. And then you fall off the wagon because hay season started or it's calving season or you're combining corn, whatever it is. But I think thinking outside the box on how can I prioritize fitness today, and then everything else needs to work its way in. So it's like prioritize the fitness first and then craft your day around that, I think could be helpful. And so what this looks like for me is when it's rotary mowing season, I'm all day out clipping pastures. And then we're doing hay at the same time. So some very long days in the summertime. And to keep consistent with the running, rather than calling my wife or my dad to come get me from the hayfield or the whatever pasture that I'm rotary mowing, I will go run back home. And then I might eat lunch. And then from home, I'll go run back to the pasture. And there's days where if I have a 6-mile run, but I don't actually have the time for, an hour-long run to do the 6 miles, I'll break it up into chunks. Yeah, it's maybe not ideal, but during that season, I have the adaptability, the flexibility, and I'm kind of crafting my day around the fitness. And again, I'm not going to have somebody come pick me up and I'm going to go run there. Or you could walk. It doesn't have to be running. For my parents, they've been very consistent with walking in the morning together. And I've noticed as they've gotten older, they're very consistent with that. And just stuff like that, where they have built their day around their morning walks in the morning and they don't deviate from that. So I think starting small, again, with the goal setting, start small. Maybe if you're not doing any kind of workouts, maybe go for a 1/2 mile walk for 4 days a week. Maybe do some stretching on those other days and certainly on the days that you walk or run. But I think starting small and attaching it to kind of the bigger meaning will certainly help people going from, I wouldn't say the couch, but from kind of that point A to whatever the point B is.
Right. And I think the big thing that you mentioned there that I want to hit home on is, and for me anyways, I'm kind of the same way. If I don't get it done in the morning, it's really hard for me to get it in somewhere throughout the rest of the day. And as farmers, as ranchers, we're generally physically active. And so we tell ourselves, well, that's good enough. In some cases, maybe it is. But at the end of the day, I think whenever we're trying to work towards something, it takes intentionality, right? So being intentional that I am going to, walk home from the tractor or something, or run home, whatever the case is, just being intentional with what you're trying to accomplish. Because yes, being physically active throughout your workday is very good. But when you take the time to be intentional to actually get that extra workout in, there's a lot more value in that, in my opinion. And so, like I said, I feel like that's why a lot of people use that as an excuse to not work out. Like I said, glad everybody's still being physically active, but I think it's the intentionality that's going to take you one step further.
And who cares if you look weird doing it? I had a coaching client of mine who has a lot of irons in his fire. He does welding. They have cattle. They farm as well. Very active people in their community. Long list of things. I think he might have been a volunteer firefighter as well. But I was encouraging him on physical fitness to think outside the box. He started to take his bicycle with him on his truck. And so he wasn't really much of a runner. He wanted to go faster than walking, but he started biking from wherever he was working that day. Whether he was doing a welding project, he would bike to and from and stuff like that. Who cares if you look weird doing it? You're living your life. And sometimes to reach the better version of ourselves, you have to swim against the grain. And oftentimes I think you have to. It's just a kind of a prerequisite to get to the next level. You have to swim against the grain. So who cares what you look like doing it if it is weird or not normal? I probably look weird running from the pasture back home, but I could care less, Garrett.
Right. And part of that is facing the fear to not be afraid to look weird, right?
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, I think as we kind of get to rounding this out, let's talk about your coaching program a little bit, and then we can kind of anything else that you want to touch on before we kind of round this call out today.
Yeah. So this is perfect that we talk about this because we've talked a lot about facing our fears. I grew up hating public speaking, Garrett, and I've had the opportunity since joining the military and then just a couple jobs that I've had post college where speaking was required in groups of people. And so I've gotten more comfortable. But here kind of the last probably 6 months to a year, I have really expanded my coaching services to public speaking. I bring that up, Garrett, because we're talking about facing our fears. And what I have realized is because I am starting to speak in front of groups now. I hated public speaking even through college, but now I'm looking forward to it. I'm reaching out, trying to make those connections for public speaking. And I feel like I can serve at a higher level because I'm facing that fear. And honestly, Garrett, anymore, it's almost not even really a fear of mine. So I've totally taken the power or the kind of the negative grip that public speaking had. I kind of just went right at it and said, I'm going to take you head on. And now I look forward to public speaking opportunities. So here, last probably 6 months to a year, I've had the opportunity to do some traveling and some speaking across the country, just even outside of Kansas. And that's been really a high point in my coaching. And it's allowed me to have even deeper conversations with a broad range of individuals, even outside of ag. And that's helping me in my coaching, whether I'm coaching people one-to-one. But I love the opportunity to meet people wherever they're at, whatever that point A is. And from an outside perspective, I give them kind of the tools to go fish themselves. I don't do it for them. They still have to chase down whatever that point B is. They have to put the steps in place. but I give them the tools and basically the fishing pole, and they go fish for themselves. But I have that outside perspective, and I've really enjoyed that, whether I'm coaching resiliency in the guard or take on one-to-one coaching client or whatever it is, or public speaking. I have the outside perspective to kind of analyze and see where people are at in the weeds of their life. And I can offer them some different tools to better navigate the stresses and the weeds of their life, so to say.
Yeah, that's awesome. And yeah, that public speaking, they're again facing that fear and getting over it, and then getting on the other side of that and being able to see the value that you have by helping other people just by facing your initial fear, right? And so, yeah, I think that's awesome. And I'm glad that you've been able to have those public speaking events and be able to help those people out. So, how are you helping people specifically? How could people potentially get to work with you or find you? Or let's kind of dive into that.
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, my mind is really kind of in the finishing touches of planning our 4th annual ruck here. My ranching operation is called Sachse Family Angus, and this will be the 4th annual ruck that we've hosted. And a ruck, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, it's just hiking or walking with weight on your back. Think of, if you're a bow hunter, you're out in Montana and you've got your gear that you need and you're hiking, rucking through the mountains or the prairie. In the military, rucking, when you see an infantry soldier with all the weight on their back, that's rucking. And it's a great way. It's a lower impact on your knees kind of way, and not running, but a lower impact, still high cardio way to do something physically challenging and allow people to gain that confidence, that mental clarity, the mental gains going into the new year. And so each December, the last couple of years, we've hosted a ruck. We offer different distances, a 5K, a 10K, and then a 20K. We've only had a few people brave enough to do the 20K, hoping to build and grow that aspect this year. But it's just a cool way to bring community, Kansas City area community folks. We're starting to grow outside of Kansas a little bit. There's some folks from Iowa I know that are coming down. We'd love to have some Nebraska individuals, Garrett, come down for that. But awesome opportunity for people to network, just to be around kind of like-minded people, to do something physically hard and build community around that. And so my coaching as of the last couple months has been centered around the public speaking stuff, and then just continuing to see how I can grow that ruck. We're actually starting also. So the adult ruck is December 20th. And then we had a request to do a kids version of the ruck this year. So October 25th, we're going to do our first kids ruck. So it's more family oriented. Kids can dress up in Halloween costumes. We're going to have some fun activities and stuff post ruck. It's just a shorter 2K. So like a mile and a quarter, mile and a half distance, and nothing too hard. But just have something fun for kids, kind of ages 6 to 12, with their families, come in and get out in nature and do stuff just to build that confidence, that mental confidence. And so you can find information on both of those events or connecting with me. I'm on Instagram, I'm on LinkedIn, but my website is RanchFITcoaching.com, and you can book me for public speaking, the ruck, the coaching, all of that on RanchFITcoaching.com.
Awesome. Yeah, so I was always wondering why you did it in December. Granted, you are further south than us, so it's probably not as cold in December, but December can be kind of brutal. So I guess it's good to kind of know, getting some of that clarity going into the end of the year, especially in December. It is kind of a hard time as we get into winter to generally stay as physically active, right? And so to have a little bit of momentum to carry you into the new year, maybe carry you into keeping up that routine, keeping up that action so you can get those results. It does kind of start to make sense why he did it in December now. So I appreciate that feedback.
A couple things on December is, first and foremost, and maybe on a more serious note, but just knowing, hey, we've accomplished X, Y, and Z in the year 2025. And then right at the end of the year, the last week or two, you go and do something hard that maybe you haven't done before. That confidence flows into early 2026. And then who knows what you can accomplish in 2026. So part of that is tactfully or maybe strategically placed for December for that reason. Also just Garrett, and then more on a lighthearted note, from a logistics standpoint, that's our least busy month of the entire year. We start calving in early to mid January. and we're still doing typically harvest in November. And so from a logistics standpoint, we want the harvest done. And so December was also hey, we've got nothing else to do. Let's go do a ruck. So
Right. It's just like trying to plan a wedding on the farm. You try to find the least busy time of year. Same thing for a ruck, right? That definitely makes sense. I can definitely relate to that. And that's a lot of other people. I mean, that is generally a less busy time of year. And so, yes, since John had kind of hinted at that, anybody locally that's listening to this that thinks that this would be fun, thinks that they want to challenge themselves in December, hit me up and maybe we can ride down a call pool down there or something and make that happen.
we'd love to have you.
Yes, that'd be a fun event. But John, no, I really do appreciate you jumping on the podcast here today. I think there's a lot of value in there, and I appreciate your openness and sharing all of this. Very relatable, everything you talked about. And so, any closing thoughts as we kind of round this one out today?
Yeah, it's been the theme, and I didn't anticipate this to be the theme, Garrett, but that's what I love about podcasts, and especially unstructured, unscripted podcasts, is you don't know how the conversation, you can kind of maybe prepare a little bit for it, but oftentimes I pray to God before I do a coaching call, before I public speak, before I start my day. Hey, this day, this talk, this conversation is yours, God. You take it in whatever direction that you want. And so I didn't know that facing our fears would be kind of the theme of this, but I truly want to end on that. So I'm a big fan of Stoicism. So Stoics is basically ancient philosophy, ancient wisdom that very much applies to today and everything that's going on in our world. And so Seneca, one of the ancient philosophers and Stoic, had a quote where he said, well, here he's talking about facing your fears. And he said, we are more often frightened than hurt, and we suffer more than in imagination than in reality. So what that means to me is oftentimes, again, we've kind of made up worst case scenarios in our mind. But if you tackle your fear and you face it, on the other side of that fear is a whole new world in terms of personal growth and just a better, more efficient version of yourself. And I think we're all placed here for a very specific reason. You, Garrett, are, our wives are, and we're all placed here for a very specific reason. And I think we are all meant to operate at our highest capacity. That's what the world needs of us. And so usually the very thing that we don't want to do, facing your fear, that's the thing that you need to do to get to the better version of yourself. So I want to end on facing your fears and just encourage your listeners, those who follow you, Garrett. And I want to, again, applaud you for those who follow you and the work that you're doing in your coaching. It's very, very much needed. But we're all placed here for a very specific reason. And we need to face our fears to get to that better version of ourselves. And I want to encourage our listeners this upcoming week, whenever you listen to this, throughout the week, do at least one thing, maybe two, where you can face your fears just at a small level and run with it, tackle it, and then go to the next thing and see what happens from that. Because I think the world demands of us to serve at our highest level, and we've got to face our fears to be able to do that.
I completely agree. And I'll just kind of echo that in rounding this out and face your fears in the different areas of our life. I talk a lot about the core four, your body, your being, your balance, and business. So there's going to be different of those different areas of our life that we do have to face our fears. Your body, maybe get out and then running and doing something you don't like to do. And maybe the being side of things is just putting yourself in a place where you can breed confidence back into yourself, right? And maybe it's your family. Maybe it's taking a Sunday or Saturday off or a Tuesday afternoon off. Maybe that's a fear that you have, is to take time off, face that fear, and even in the business side of things. I just feel like this episode, and maybe this is the connotation that I'm putting around things, but especially in ag, especially in the environment that we're currently in, there's got to be a lot of fears that we're going to have to face on the business side of things, especially. So take that and do the best you can to take a few little steps. Don't try to accomplish the world all in 5 steps, right? Do your best to kind of take some steps to face your fears, start getting those actions, build that foundation back for that brain health like we talked about, learn your why behind kind of the goals that you're ultimately setting, and just do your best. So I appreciate all of your conversation today, and I really hope all the listeners found value into this and can kind of resonate with this. And basically, any closing thoughts before we round this out?
No, again, I see you, Garrett, and what you're doing and what we're doing. There's a lot of synergies, and I just knowing the things that I'm doing, and they're very similar to what you're doing. It's very much needed. So keep doing what you're doing, and I'll keep doing what I'm doing, and we're going to make an impact. And I hope that there was at least one or two kind of nuggets or take home things that listeners can immediately apply to their life and just have fun and just know that we're all placed here for a reason, and run with that. Face your fears, guys.
Absolutely. Face your fears and go check out John. Go check out their website. Tune into the Ruck. Let's head down to Kansas in December and let's have a fun event there. But I appreciate you again for joining us, but that's all we got for now. And we'll catch you guys next time. Thanks for tagging along with me today as we sharpened our mindsets. If you've gained insight from today's episode, be sure to take a screenshot to share or send this episode to somebody who might also find value in it. For more, follow me on Instagram at Garrett Ruskamp or on Facebook, and join me next time for more conviction through clarity.